Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole, and this week we're building the future as we consider the impact COVID-19 is having on the architecture of our cities. Are socially distanced designs the key? We'll get the view of one of the world's top architects. Will offices ever look the same again as millions around the world are forced to work from home? Or is the future really a city where a place to live, work and play is never more than a 50-minute walk away? Architecture and design have always been inextricably linked to contemporary events. That's why major events like the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic helped persuade architects that people needed higher quality housing and garden cities, creating more generous and healthier recreational spaces. So, a century after that, just what effect will the current COVID outbreak have on the design of the spaces in which we live, work and play? As working from home becomes, for the moment at least, a more regular option, the hybrid home is likely to become the norm in new developments. A house or apartment with fewer open-plan living spaces and more office-friendly soundproofing. But with no commute, no colleagues around, and relying on video calling to interact with family and friends, there's also the problem of lack of human contact. So architects and city planners will be looking to surround housing developments with new social spaces and green infrastructure, allowing residents to interact safely within their community. The much discussed idea of the so-called 15-minute city is gaining real traction. It's the utopian ideal that everything we need being within a 15-minute walk, so our homes, our workplaces, supermarkets, gyms, doctor surgeries and recreational spaces should be no more than a quarter of an hour's walk away. As and when we get to the office, that too will be changing. Space and ventilation will be key. More windows, not just for the view, but ones which can be opened to let fresh air in, and desks will be arranged to allow greater distance between colleagues. Outside of work, many shopping centres, restaurants and other venues have already introduced one-way systems, larger doorways and wider aisles. But those temporary social distancing measures will soon be part of the design of future buildings. Architects, planners and designers want to ensure their work is fit for purpose in the future. But how quickly they can do that and what a pandemic-proof city might cost are questions yet to be answered. With me now is the principal of Zaha Hadid Architects, one of the world's most prestigious practices, Patrik Schumacher. Patrik, first of all, how do you think COVID and the lockdowns has changed the way people think about the spaces they operate in, they live in?
We're discovering new ways of life, that's for sure. I mean, we are 400 architects, everybody working from home and being as productive as ever. Some think they're even more productive. Maybe we have to put in a few more hours, but we get things done. We have also stopped all our travel. I used to travel, and many of our architects travel to China and Asia and the Middle East and the US, etc., weekly. And with all that has stopped, and again, clients are happy. We are delivering work, we're presenting work. On-site visit, that's maybe the bit which is difficult. We haven't yet found a way to properly substitute for that. But again, there's also, ways of doing that. So in terms of the work process, we're all happy. And in terms of spaces, well, our office spaces are sitting empty, and I'm sure that happens to many, many other spaces around London and elsewhere. All hotels are empty. And so there will be changes, particularly because we're not going back to where we've been. Many companies are already talking about introducing home working, flexible working, and I don't think we'll go ever back to the same amount of aviation and travel. So that means changes in the cities. That means also changes to the home, probably. We need to inflate our homes, have workspaces, internal office spaces. And I was wondering, even if you must allow sometimes to have, some employees coming to your home.
Right. But all of that, Patrik, I mean, what you're describing is exactly what has been happening in terms of where we work. But what about our attitudes to the environment in which we work? Has it changed your ideas for design?
Well, so far we are mostly working in Asia and China. There isn't much recognition of a difference. Things move forward as they have been. But thinking about Europe, thinking about the US, I think we will have to adjust. So of course, what I mean is the way we use the city is different. I mean, less public transport, less jammed up spaces, so more cycling, walking, electric bikes. So that's what we're thinking about, transport. And I can see more pedestrianization that's one major change, I think, in terms of space. We don't want to be so crowded. The outdoor is healthier. And anyway, that was going down that route. The office itself, I think, will be a different kind of place. We're coming in not daily and for the full day. It's more social spaces, meetings. In the interim, we need to be a bit more, let's say, spaced out, and that takes out some of the vibe. But in the medium to long term, I think we realize that we're going to use the office differently. And that means it's less a battery of desks where you put your head down and work, but lots of social spaces, meeting zones, communication zones, and then the kind of heads down work maybe is being done at home. So that will change the work environment. It will change the home as well, I think, in terms of residences. We need to allow for live-work scenarios much more generally.
So the thinking has to be about space, doesn't it? In terms of how far apart we are going to live and work. But that must also include the more mundane elements of work and home life, like air conditioning, ventilation. All this must be at the fore of your mind when it comes to design.
Absolutely. I mean, so far we have done, we have actually upgraded our offices in terms of the whole ventilation system. Yes, that's true. I mean, I hope that we not live forever with the virus. So I'm not thinking so far, I mean, so strictly about the health element of this. I think more about the discovery of new ways of working, new ways of traveling virtually. I think there should be much more upgraded. So there will a lot of investment go there, and this could become an architectural space, a cyberspace, a 3D space, which we inhabit and roam around, maybe kind of virtual reality, augmented reality, that the meetings rooms where we sitting together has one whole wall, a big screen window into a virtual space.
Transport hubs have been discussed, and much discussion about them during the pandemic. You recently designed Beijing's airport. You designed a metro station in Riyadh. If you'd known about the pandemic, would your designs have been different, or will you have to design different ways of entry and accommodation in these kind of hubs?
Yes, I mean, I think the jam points are, of course, security check. That's the main thing, where you get very close, where you queue up. The airport itself, I think it's mostly the processing zone, security, as well as maybe baggage retrieval, everywhere you have concentrations of people. Otherwise, we are very, very spacious. And of course, when you enter the plane again. So every time we have queuing and funneling of people, that's where we need to look at. But it's not something which the building itself can solve. That's also the aircraft. You might have to have multiple entrances into the aircraft.
But
all things
that's absolutely true. But does it change the aesthetics going forward? I mean, I know you recently designed an international football center in Xi'an in China. Again, if you'd known about the pandemic, would the design have changed, do you think?
Well, I think, as I said, in terms of our airport, yes, I think we need to have different processing. And the football stadium, again, I mean, I don't know if we can, if with the virus around and with the pandemic not being solved, that we could have such games at all. I mean, outdoor space, of course, helps. So I don't know if the football, could space seats bit further. That's what I would have done. You need to reduce overall density, and I think that can be done with a bit more space between the seats and not having stand-up zones, for instance, where you just jam up too much. It might take away a little bit the intensity of the experience, and that would be maybe for a lot of people the problem. But no, I don't think in principle it would affect aesthetics. I mean, the whole thing is a little bit less dense and intense as an experience. For instance, we have the City of London, a fantastic kind of financial industry hub with zero residential. So this could become a ghost town if all the companies do these kind of policies. What do? We need to really allow for then conversion into residential. We need to allow that fluidity of continuous converting functions and discovering new functions in the center of cities. Otherwise, they will become ghost towns.
That point you just made about adapting city centres is an extremely important one, because you've been very outspoken about the global housing crisis and how it could be solved. You say unfettered capitalism is the answer. Can you explain a little more about what you mean by that?
What I mean primarily is freedom of entrepreneurship, the idea that entrepreneurs can come up with new products, new solutions, and that we have different opportunities to bid for space, to understand and explore, use the market as a discovery process. For instance, if the moment everything is so over-regulated and standardized that a developer, an urban entrepreneur, cannot compete with new ideas, new product. So for instance, co-living was something before the crisis was a new discovery, which using a loophole, and was a new product in the city, but everything got stuck with planners. Many projects were on hold, although it's a very nice and interesting and innovative way of living together, but it doesn't meet the kind of standards some bureaucrats have set a number of years ago in terms of sizes of apartments, but they didn't recognize that we have actually a lot of shared space in this case. And to allow for a discovery process, a new product, then they're coming in and recognizing this, and we want to kind of freeze the first example of co-living and make everything which they have kind of offered the frozen standard for the future. So that's not the way. We really need to, we don't know, nobody knows what will be the way, what will be the pattern in terms of, for instance, live-work patterns where you have mixed communities, but also mixed units. I mean, in China, what was very fascinating before, they also kind of normalized with the situation. And what is interesting that under COVID, under certain pressures, there have been, for instance, occupancy licensing have been reduced. In China, they actually opened up temporarily to reignite the economy. They allowed people to just go out and open businesses without any license. So they have the kind of filling up the streets with little stalls and making up shop on the sidewalks, and that was allowed, and that got to give a boost to the whole economy there. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. When I'm talking about capitalism, I'm talking about entrepreneurship, markets, both in terms of customers and consumer choice, but also in terms of occupational choices. We need to allow everybody to take risk, and we also need to tolerate a bit more risk. And the risk takers are the entrepreneurs. Some of them will be over enthusiastic, and the market will correct their mistakes. They will lose some of their investment, but other investments will fly. And we need that in this current condition, because we really don't know what the processes and life process should be. And the same goes for streets. It means the way streets are furnished, occupied, inhabited, activated. I think these could be wonderful opportunities for entrepreneurship, urban entrepreneurship.
Patrik Schumacher, architect, many thanks to you for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you.
Still to come here on The Agenda, is Paris all set to become the world's first truly 15-minute city? We'll explain all in just a moment.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now. Welcome back to The Agenda. As lockdown measures force billions around the world to reconsider the way they live, the concept of the 15-minute city, one where everything you need to live, work and play is within a 15-minute walk, has gained real traction. Now, the driving force behind that concept is Carlos Moreno. Carlos is professor at the Sorbonne in Paris and advisor to the mayor of Paris, and he joins me now. Carlos, thanks for joining me on The Agenda. Can you explain how the concept of the 15-minute city works?
The concept of 15-minute city, in a nutshell, the idea is to design or redesign the cities within the distance of 15 minutes by walk or by bike in order to enable the 6 essential urban functions for living in cities. To live, to work, to supply, to education, to health, and to enjoy. I think that if we have the possibility to reduce the time for the mass transportation or to take individual car, we have the possibility to have a useful time for living in cities in the better conditions. The 15-minute city, this is the new concept for changing the paradigm for continuing to live in cities differently today.
And Professor, you say this is a concept. Is it likely to stay a concept? Because there must be huge practical hurdles to get over to achieve that.
Today, the problem in cities is a double problem. On the one hand, we live in the era of the climate change. We need today to develop cities based on how could we fight against climate change. In consequence, we need to reduce the CO2 emissions. On the other hand, we live today in the planet with the pandemic COVID-19 crisis. And this is not possible today to continue to live in the same conditions for working, for living, for commuting. We need to change if we wanted to preserve the physical distances. These 2 factors, climate change and COVID-19 pandemic crisis, it's the big threat and at the same time a big opportunity for change of the paradigm. The 15-minute city, in fact, is the possibility to rediscover with the proximity another rhythm for living in cities, to change the pace of city and to use differently the different resources in the proximity, infrastructures for use more in the intensive way the different building and different physical infrastructures, and to develop the new solidarity and to take care of elderly people and fragile people and kids.
Now, you have given advice to Anne Hidalgo, Mayor of Paris.
Oui.
Was she receptive to the idea, the concept of a 15-minute city? And if so, what kind of time scale are we talking about?
15-minute cities, it is a journey. We need several years. In the case of the city of Paris, we have 6 years for radically change the city of Paris in this way of proximity. Ecology, proximity, solidarity, participation, this is the roadmap for the 15-minute cities in the city of Paris for the next 6 years.
So that's quite a short time scale, I would suggest, to try and achieve all those elements. I would also suggest that perhaps you will be creating a more insular city. I know that the basis of your thesis is that we should move around less to save transport, to save emissions. But wouldn't that make people sort of move more insular and look inwards rather than outwards in a city?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because in fact, we need, it is necessary to reduce the individual car. We need to ban diesel car of cities. We need to develop free car cities. We need to transform cities not for car, but for human, for pedestrian. We need to reduce the traffic, to increase bike lanes. We need to develop the new models for commuting, of course, in Paris. The question is, in fact, how could we develop this concept in the framework of the big cities, and in particular, metropolises. The central point, this is the polycentric city, multi-centric city. We consider that in the big metropolises, in the case in the metropolis of Paris, we need to develop this way for a massive decentralization of cities. We need, in fact, to develop in the 50 kilometers around this way for moving the jobs close to people. Before the pandemic crisis, many people considered that it's not possible to work close from home. Today, with the new technologies in the pandemic crisis, COVID-19 era, we don't have a choice that to promote digital and remote jobs. This is possible today to develop this polycentric metropolises in the different configurations.
Well, that was my next question. You talk about the developed configurations or conurbations. Is this really aimed at the developing countries? Could perhaps poorer cities, could they adopt this as well? Or would it be harder, especially when you have to consult so many stakeholders to create a successful 15-minute city?
Yes, you're right. We need today to transform the social and economic model of cities, because we live today in cities, including in metropolises, with the same paradigm of the last century. In fact, the reality is that the cities today are totally segmented. The social and economic segmentation of cities, this is a harder reality. Even if the metropolises, the social and economical segmentation, it's a real difficulty for mixing people. This is one of the reasons for the existence of the very important distances and time for commuting. In general, the average is 1 hour or more only for going from my home to my work. And this is not possible. In fact, I think that for a long time, we have accepted the unacceptable, the social and economical segmentation. When we propose the new paradigm based on the polycentric cities, we wanted to mix the urban social functions. We wanted to mix to live, to work, to supply, to enjoy, to education. We wanted to break this social and economical segmentation. And it is possible, in fact, because the model for working it's today in the turning point. Because the COVID-19 crisis, this is very deep crisis. We need to offer the other models for working. We need to offer other models for developing solidarity. And the way of the polycentric cities, of the rediscover the proximity, of better use the infrastructures. This is the concept of Coronotopia, the multi-purpose functions for infrastructures. This is the possibility for offering a new way for living, including in the big metropolises.
Professor Carlos Moreno, thank you very much for joining me here on The Agenda.
Thank you.
In Britain and Europe, the 1980s was a decade of economic transformation. City offices replaced factories as engines of growth. People largely moved to the suburbs and workers relied on sandwich bars for the fuel they ran on. But the way people live and work has always been changing, and COVID has provided the impetus for faster change than had been expected. The many businesses that relied on commuters to make a living have been going bust. And business lobby groups, like the UK-based CBI, are warning cities will become ghost towns unless office staff get back to their desks. The experience of lockdown proved to many employers what they'd not quite believed, and that is that large-scale remote working is effective, even after the health threat from COVID-19 has passed. It's likely that many employers will continue to allow staff to work from home some of the time, given the cost savings. And that means a complete overhaul of the design of our offices, our homes, and our public spaces. A new work-life balance will need to be reflected in every new building. Now, a recent Dutch study suggested that people accept a longer commute for every extra hour of the week they can work at home. But of course, those homes will now need to be equipped with all the space we need to facilitate working in this new normal. Cities won't die, but their benefits could become more diffuse, with well-paid workers spread further into the rest of the country. Coming up on a future agenda, as a second wave grips Europe, we'll be finding out just where we are in the hunt for a COVID-19 vaccine. Don't forget, for more agenda content, you can visit our website, or you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. But for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the Agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.